I was told that we're talking about Gola and Geula. The word Galus could also be Gola, Gimel Vav Lamed Hey, and Geula is Gimel Lamed Vav, Gimel Aleph Vav Lamed Hey. 4 out of 5 letters are the same, and only one letter, the Aleph, is different. So 80% of Geula is made up from Gola. And that's a bit of a wonder, because naturally Gola and Geula, the era of exile, the era of redemption, are opposites. So how could it be that the makeup of the word Geula is 80% of the word Gola? And what is the difference between the words Gola and the words Geula? Just one small aleph makes the whole difference. Which, of course, the aleph we know from Echad of Shema is Alufay Shalaylam, is referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we'll discuss soon. So that's the topic of today. I'd like to begin with a story that will help us understand where we're going. So Yankel comes home from shul one day, and he's crying, he's in bitter tears. He can't calm down. His wife asks him, Yankel, what's wrong? What happened? What's the bad news? So Yankel tells her, there was a Maggid who came to town, and he spoke all about the coming of Mashiach and the future redemption. So his wife says, no, so what's wrong? So very good, you should be happy. So he says, Elka, what don't you understand? We've been in this village and the other village. We dealt with this parrots, with the other parrots. We finally settled. We know how to work with this parrots. Our business is stable. Finally. And now what does he say? Mashiach is coming, and we're going to have to pack our bags and move to Eretz Yisrael and go to Yerushalayim. I mean, come on. Enough is enough. So Elka tells him, Yankel, you got to have emunah. You gotta have bitachon, you gotta have faith in Hashem, you gotta have trust in Hashem. The same God who helped us so far with this parrots and with that parrots and the other parrots is gonna save us also from Mashiach. So obviously, the way Yankel understood the coming of Mashiach, and the way Yankel understood the idea of redemption, and his wife too actually, is very different from what it really is. Obviously. So that's the real question. What is Geula? And what does Mashiach come for? There's even a saying that the Mashiach that many people are waiting for is never going to come. And the Mashiach that's going to come, some may not even want. The Mashiach that we're naturally waiting for is the one who's going to bring refuah, he's going to make everybody healthy, he's going to give everybody parnasa, we'll have what we need physically. So the Mashiach that many of us are anticipating is one who will solve our problems. In the time of exile, things are a little bit difficult. And in the era of redemption, when Mashiach will come, things will be good. If you ask a kid why he wants Mashiach to come, he'll tell you. His teacher told him that the Gemara says in the end of Ksubah that when Mashiach comes, candies are going to grow on the tree. Okay, the Gemara doesn't say candy. The Gemara says gluskois uklei milas. Gluskois means like some kind of cakes. And klei milas is clothing of meshi, of silk. So the Gemara says when Mashiach comes, on the trees you'll have ready garments and ready-made food. So when a kid goes to Cheder, his teacher tells him, Mashiach's going to come, candies are going to grow on the trees. And that's why the young child waits for Mashiach. Things are going to be so good. And the honest truth is that the Rambam also says, B'chol ha'ma'adanim mitzuyim ka'afar, that all of the goodies, all of the delicacies will be found as much as dust, as dirt. So yes, it's true that Mashiach is going to bring a lot of physical good with him. We'll be healthy, we'll have what we need, we'll have good life. It's true. But obviously there's more to it. In the Haftarah of Shabbos Nachamu, which is coming up quickly after Tisha B'Av, hopefully this year we'll see the Nachamu even before then. The Mashiach will come now, and we will avoid the fasting on Tisha B'Av, which is a pain. And of course, more than that, we'll be able to experience what we're waiting for so many years, the revelation of Mashiach and the era of redemption in its true sense. So in Yeshaya, a few psukim after Nachamu Ami, he says, "V'nigla kveid Hashem, v'ro kol basar yachdav." That what's going to happen when Mashiach is going to come? The glory of Hashem will be revealed, and all flesh will be able to see it in unison. Which means, in simple words, that in our days, the glory of Hashem is not yet revealed. It's concealed. When Mashiach will come, it will be revealed. So the difference between now and then is whether Hashem is revealed or concealed. So obviously there's still room for discussion, but it already gives us a glimpse into the answer and explanation that yes, the entire difference between Gola and Geula is that Aleph. The difference between now and then is whether the Aleph of Hashem is revealed or concealed. In our days, Hashem exists. Hashem creates the world constantly. But the question is, are we aware of it? Do we see it? Is it obvious? Is it self-evident? It's not. When Mashiach comes, however, that will change. It will be obvious. It will be clear. It will be self-evident. And our life will be all about awareness of Hashem and knowledge of Hashem. And like the Rambam says, when he talks about the laws of Mashiach, he tells us that what is going to take place in that time, in the era of Mashiach, the entire world, not only the Jewish people, the entire world will be involved with knowing Hashem. That will be our occupation. And the Rambam says, how do I know that? Because Yeshaya Hanavi says it. Ki mala haaretz deya es Hashem, kamayim laya mechasim. That the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem, just like the water covers the seabed. Just as the bottom of the water, the seabed, is completely concealed, flooded with, covered with water, and when you look at the ocean, all you see is water, water, and more water. So too, when Mashiach comes, says the Navi, Mallah haaretz deyas Hashem, that the entire world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. Now it's interesting that if you go back to the Rambam source, to the Navi, the Rambam says, Ki mallah haaretz. He's giving a reason for something. Such and such will take place. Why will that be? Since the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. So I looked inside, and Yeshaya says before that, Lo yareyu v'lo yashchisu b'chol har kachi. That when Mashiach comes, the animals won't do any more evil. They won't do any more damage. In our days, we know there are certain animals that are wild animals, that are dangerous animals, and they could make trouble. You got to be careful. Says the Navi, when Mashiach comes, don't worry about it. Lo yareu v'lo yashchisu. Why not? Why will they not do damage anymore? Since the world will be filled with knowledge of God, therefore the animals won't be dangerous. What's the connection? Because you're going to be sitting and learning about Hashem, therefore the animals are not going to go bite?
Become vegetarians.
No, they recognize
meat.
Yeah, the Arya Kabokar Yechal Teven. He says that a few psukim later,
Yeah, that's
that a lion will eat straw just like the cow does. So obviously,
what's the connection?
there's going to be a big change in the world that will cause for us to change, that will cause for the nations of the world to change, that will even cause the animals to change. And that difference goes back to the other pasuk. V'nigla kavod Hashem v'ro kol basar yachdav. Then when Mashiach comes, there will be a switch. In our days, we see physical things. Spiritual things we don't see. We have 5 senses, and the only things that we can feel are physical things. Spiritual things are not tangible. It's beyond us. We could believe in it, but with our senses we cannot grasp it. When Mashiach comes, says the Navi, the opposite will be true. V'ro kol basar, flesh, physical flesh will be able to see godliness. And it's interesting that he doesn't say einei basar, the eyes of flesh will be able to see. Flesh, period. Which means to say, materialism, physicality, as a whole, will be receptive to spirituality and to godliness. Not just our eyes will be able to see godliness. The whole entire physical being, whether it's a person or even an animal, will be receptive to godliness and to spirituality. And that's a big change. That's a big chiddush. In the language of Chassidus, it says that the difference between now and then is that in our days, oilamais b'pshitus, elikus b'hischadshus. The fact that the world exists is obvious, simple. No one needs to explain it to you, no one needs to convince you. We all know and we all understand that the world exists. Elikus b'hischadshus. The fact that Hashem exists, that's a chiddush, that's a novelty. That we need to think about, that we need to pay attention to, that we need to discuss, that we need to understand. It's not self-understood. When Mashiach comes, the opposite will be true. Elikus v'pshitus, the fact that Hashem exists will be davar pashut, obvious, self-understood. The fact that the world also exists, that's a chiddush. Wow. Not only Hashem exists, even the world could exist. That's a novelty. So our mindset will switch. The way we see things now and the way we'll see things then is completely different. How will that change happen? That change depends upon us. Obviously with Hashem's strong assistance. But it's our business to make that change. Since, as we said earlier, Gola is 80% of Geula. And even the Aleph, which seems to be missing, is only missing in the word. But it's not really missing, it's only hidden. The Aleph, which is Alufa Shalaylam, is definitely there. Hashem created the world, Hashem creates the world, and Hashem controls the world, and He's involved, and we're involved with Him. But He's concealed. What's our job in this world? Everything that Hashem created in this world is here to give Hashem honor. In other words, that we should be in touch with reality, that He is the true being, that He is our maker. And it's our job to make this happen. We have to get rid of that concealment as much as we can. We have to reveal Hashem in this world as much as we can. And when we do our part, Hashem will respond and do His part and send us Mashiach and give us the Beis HaMikdash and bring the Geula and ultimately Tchias HaMeisim. So Hashem will do His part, take off the concealment. But how does that concealment come off? Through us coming to the realization that the Geula is not a bad thing. We're not going to leave Golos behind. Should we say that we're wasting our time, wasting our life? And like Yankel said, we're going to have to leave everything and go to Eretz Yisrael? No, obviously not. every good thing that we do and we accumulate here goes with us to the world of Mashiach. We're not here wasting our time, wasting our life. If we have Hashem in mind 24/7. Things that we do that are disconnected from Hashem, chas v'shalom, we have to leave behind, because that's real galus. But things that we do here nowadays that are connected to Hashem, either because it's a mitzvah, or because we do it l'shem shamayim, or that we have the constant awareness of Hashem's existence and involvement in our life, that comes with us to the Geula. Not only it comes with us, that's what the Geula is made up from. The Geula is made up of Gola. The fact that here and now we reveal Hashem in our life as much as we can. I mentioned earlier a pasuk from the Haftarah of Shabbos Nachamu. The Haftarah begins Nachamu Nachamu, a double Nachama. In the Gemara we find a similar expression. The Gemara at the end of Masechta Makos tells a story of Rabbi Akiva and his friends. They were walking together, and they in Rome, and they heard the noise. There was a lot going on, nightlife. I don't know what. There was a lot of excitement. It was happening. So Rabbi Akiva's friends began to cry, and Rabbi Akiva began to laugh. So his friends turned to him and they asked him, "Why are you crying? Why are you laughing?" I'm sorry. So he tells them, "Why are you crying?" So they said, "Why are we crying? These people, the Romans, are the ones who destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And they're having such a good time. How can we not cry?" Says Rabbi Akiva, "Exactly, that's why I'm laughing. If this is the way Hashem treats those who don't do what He wants, how much more so will He treat those who do what He wants?" The Gemara doesn't stop here. The Gemara says, it happened another time. Rabbi Akiva and the same crew were going towards Yerushalayim.
That is the Churban of Yerushalayim.
Yeah, it was after the Churban. And when they saw Yerushalayim from a distance, they ripped their clothing, because that's the halacha. When you see Yerushalayim b'churbana, you rip your clothes. And by the way, just to note, Rabbi Akiva also ripped his clothes. All of them together saw the Churban, reacted in the way they're supposed to react. They walked further, closer, and they saw a fox walking around in the place of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, of the Holy of Holies. And again, Rabbi Akiva's friends began to cry, and Rabbi Akiva began to laugh. And again, they asked him why he's laughing, and again he asked them why they're crying, and they answered. In the place where Torah tells us that a zar, someone who doesn't belong there, is not allowed to be there, and now the fox is running around, should we not cry? So Rabbi Akiva says, yeah, that's why I'm laughing. And he explains. There's a nevuah about the destruction, and there's a nevuah about the redemption. Until I didn't see with my own eyes how the nevuah of destruction is being fulfilled, I didn't know how will it look when the nevuah will be fulfilled about the redemption. But now that I see how this nevuah is being fulfilled, I can already imagine how the next nevuah will be fulfilled. So we basically see that Rabbi Akiva and his friends were able to be in the same place at the same time, but two different realities. They both saw the same thing, they both experienced the same thing, but they both had a completely different experience. Rabbi Akiva's friends were crying because they saw something that wasn't good. Rabbi Akiva saw through it. And the exact explanation of what Rabbi Akiva understood more than them is a whole long discussion. I'm not going to go there at all. But on the simplest level, it is explained according to another story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was traveling, and he came to town, and he wanted to stay over the night, and no one let him into the house. He had no choice. He went to the forest nearby. And with him, he traveled with three things. He traveled with a candle, so he can learn in the middle of the night. He traveled with a rooster to wake him up early. He traveled with a donkey to carry his things or to ride on sometimes. And as he's sleeping, he hears crazy noises. I'm sorry, that was later. First he hears his donkey being attacked by a wild animal. And then his rooster being attacked by a wild animal. And then when he's sitting with his candle and all he has is his candle and he's learning, he has nothing left, a wind comes and blows out the candle and he's really stuck. Rabbi Akiva's response to these three things was, Kol ma da'avid rachamana l'tav avid. Everything that Hashem does is for good. A short while later, Rabbi Akiva hears crazy noises coming from the city, and in the morning, when he went into the city, he saw the city was attacked at night, and they were robbed and murdered, God knows what. And here he saw so quickly that what happened to him, which could have seemed as a bad thing, was in essence a good thing. Had he had his donkey that would make noise, or his rooster that would make noise, or his candle that would be shining, maybe he would have been caught. But now that he didn't have these three things, it actually did him a lot of good. So Rabbi Akiva knew how to see through things, and knew how to take things in the right perspective. And Rabbi Akiva was able to see in the Churban, in the destruction, in the Galus, he was able to see the Geula, the redemption, the future. And he was able to laugh even if his friends were crying. The Galus is only an introduction to the Geula. And as I said, not just an introduction, but the Galus, for the most part, comes with to the Geula. We don't leave good things behind. It comes with us. But what do we need to do? We need to bring that Aleph, we need to bring the Alufa Shalaylam, the Rebbeinu Shalaylam, and we have to reveal him in this world. The Mishnah tells us that in the Beis HaMikdash there were 10 miracles that took place all the time, which implies that when a Yid came to the Beis HaMikdash, they actually experienced a godly revelation. You came to a place where miracles were normal. Can you imagine such a thing? That miracles are normal, they happen all the time, every day?
It's like it's not a miracle anymore.
It makes like it's not a miracle anymore. It's almost like a lekus b'pshitus, that you see the hand of Hashem in your face. And that's why it says that when the Yidden came to the Beis HaMikdash 3 times a year, it gave them strength for the rest of the year. Because they came to a time and to a place where miracles were normal. In other words, where they saw the hand of Hashem. And when they saw Hashem, it gave them the strength they needed. We say in davening, in Musaf, that nowadays we can't go to be oilel l'regel, and we can't see, we can't be seen. We come to the Beis HaMikdash to see Hashem, and for Hashem to see us. Not just to appear so Hashem sees us, but also that we should see godliness. And as I said, particularly through the 10 miracles that constantly took place, when a Yid came into there and spent some time over there, what was the experience? That he saw godliness. And that caused total bittul, lishtachvis l'fanecha, that one would bow to Hashem entirely. What caused it? The fact that he saw godliness. That's the time of the Beis HaMikdash. even if you weren't there every single day, by coming there 3 times a year, it brought you that mindset, that awareness. In our days, the pasuk says, "Hayinu kecholmim." We're like in a dream. What is a dream? A dream is a combination of 2 opposites. You see funny things that don't make sense. It's all real things from your imagination, but they're all confused. I don't have to explain that. Everyone knows it from their own experiences. That a dream is a bunch of real things, but it's one big mess. Time of Golos is a time of Hayinu kecholmim. We're in a dream. We open a Chumash and we learn Hashem's Torah. We dive into Hashem. We're standing and we're saying Baruch Atah Hashem. We're actually talking to Him, and it's a real experience, hopefully, on some level at least. And then we walk away, and we come down to what we call reality, and it's completely different of where we were a few minutes ago. 5 minutes ago, your eyes were closed, and you were saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad. And now you're done with that. You put your towels and tefillin away, and you're doing who knows what, and not necessarily exactly what's expected of us. How could that be? What are we? Are we crazy people? Are we hypocrites? How is it possible? And sometimes we ask ourselves that question. And of course, it's one of the things that the Alter Rebbe talks about in Tanya, that one has to understand that he has not only a nefesh yetzer tov and yetzer hara, but we also have a nefesh alikis. A nefesh abamis. It's not just about 2 inclinations, but we have 2 souls. But that's, I guess, what we usually learn here on Thursday evenings. So how can we have 2 opposite lives? How can we 1 minute be here and the other minute be there? And they're both sincere, seemingly. And the answer is, Hayinu kecholmim, we're in a dream. And in a dream, opposites can coexist. In our days, before Mashiach comes, opposites coexist. On the one hand, you ask Yid, do you believe in Hashem? 100%. Do you do everything he wants? All of a sudden he's quiet. What happened? A second ago when someone asked you, do you believe in Hashem? The answer was yes. Without any questions asked, there was no doubt. And now all of a sudden, when you're asked whether or not you do everything according to His will, it's hard to answer. Why is that? Because we're living in a dream. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, where we saw Hashem, again, even if not every single day, but we went there 3 times a year, and that had an influence on the rest of the year. So, Elikus Pshitus, Hashem's existence was obvious to us, and we didn't have the challenges within ourselves that we have today. In our days, where we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, and we don't see the miracles, we have it harder. In our days, even to identify a miracle is a big job. In summer 1976, after the whole story in Antebi, the Rebbe spoke a few times during that summer, talking about the fact that we have to appreciate God's miracles. To go and say that it's nature, why would you want to think that? Miracles happened. But he had to take his time and talk about it and explain it, because it's possible, if you want, to find other excuses. Say, oh, it's nature. So what? Nice coincidence. Things worked out. It's important to find Hashem when Hashem wants to reveal Himself and does a miracle for us. You have to be smart enough to identify it. But it doesn't come natural and on its own if you don't pay attention to it and if you don't want to see it. So it's about the approach, it's about the awareness, it's about the realization that everything is Hashem. And as I mentioned earlier, from the Rambam, that when Mashiach comes, what's going to happen? What are we going to be busy with? The knowledge of Hashem. We'll be thinking about Him, we'll understand Him. It'll be in our face. How do we prepare ourselves for that era? By putting in our minds right now, as much as we can, the knowledge of Hashem and His existence. And particularly, that can be done through learning Chassidus. Because what is the majority of the discussion in Chassidus about the existence of Hashem and of godliness and all of the details, and to understand it and to have a somewhat of an idea of what we're talking about. One can say, I learned Chassidus here and there, but I don't really get it entirely. It's concepts that are beyond me, and I don't really connect. Why am I spending my time in learning a subject that's so abstract? When you learn Gemara, it talks about very practical things that I can relate to, that I understand. So I know there's an ox, and I know there's a cow, and I know what it means that the ox went ahead and gored the cow. So that's something that I understand easily. But when it comes to talking about lofty things, and this sphera and the other sphera, and this madrega and the other madrega, why? Thank you. Why are we trying to understand things that are beyond us, and we don't get it fully anyway? So this question is an old question. I'm not the first one to ask it. You're not the first one to ask it. A chassid came to the Tzemach Tzedek and he said, Rebbe, you tell us that we should learn Chassidus, and we should learn Chassidus, and we should learn Chassidus, but you know how much we understand. Why don't we just wait patiently? Mashiach will come, and when Mashiach comes, we'll learn it, we'll understand it. It'll be good. Why are we making ourselves crazy now and wasting our time? So Tzedek listened to his question, and then he said, smart people were having a conversation in a room. A guy was standing outside behind the door, and he was trying to listen in. So he didn't hear every word. And even what he heard, he didn't exactly understand everything. But he had an idea of what they were talking about. He was curious, he was interested. When they finished their conversation, he went over to one of them. I said, can you do me a favor? I was standing behind the door, I was listening to the conversation. It sounded very interesting to me. I'm really curious. Can you please tell me some things that were discussed? Sure, why not? And he starts telling him and explaining to him what they were talking about. And every few seconds, the guy goes, now I get it. Now I get it. He was putting together the bits and pieces of the words he heard and the words he understood with the real thing. So Tzedek turns to the chassid and says, this is why we learn Chassidus. So when Mashiach comes, we'll be able to say, now I get it. And for for that it's worth it. So it's true that we don't get it entirely. And it's a lot of words that are sometimes beyond us. Of course, we're supposed to understand, and we do thank God understand. But sometimes we ask ourselves, for real, what's going on? Do I really get it? And why don't I just wait patiently for Mashiach to come? But for the Mashiach's going to come, and godliness is going to be revealed. And like I mentioned earlier, the Mashiach that we're waiting for may not be the Mashiach who's going to show up. If you're waiting for Mashiach just to be able to have a very tasty lunch and a very tasty dinner, it's just not what it's about. The reality of that era is not a reality where materialism is going to be important. So if our whole life right now is all about materialism and how we can chase it and how we can reach it, and we think that when Mashiach comes we're going to reach it, we're making a small mistake, a big mistake. We have to train ourselves in our days to find that hidden aleph in Geula, so when Geula happens, we're like, we're so happy Mashiach you came. We're so happy Geula happened. We don't want to say, this is what we waited for, really? We want to be prepared, we want to be ready. We want to be able to appreciate it. And the more Hashem becomes part of our awareness, and particularly through learning Chassidus, because it's just, that's what it's all about. The entire discussion is about bringing Hashem into your seichel and into your feelings and into your actions. It so happens to be, not so happens to be, this is what it means. The Baal Shem Tov, in the year Tav Kuf Zayin, on Rosh Hashanah, made Aliyas HaNeshama. Aliyas HaNeshama means that for a moment, you looked at him and he looked like he was not conscious. But the Talmidim knew not to bother him. I found Rosh Hashanah, the Baal Shem Tov is a little bit out of it. let's wait for him to come back, show up. And he did. Afterwards, he wrote a letter to his brother-in-law, Rabbi Gershon Kitzever. And in the letter he writes, on Rosh Hashanah, I made Aliyah Sanashama, and I went from Heichal to Heichal, from chamber to chamber. And I got to the Heichal of Mashiach, I came to the chamber of Mashiach. So I asked him, Ei Masai Hasimar, when is your honor going to show up? When are you coming? So he answered me, and he added a few more words. When you will take your well springs, the Torah that you are teaching, Chassidus, and it will be spread chutza all the way out, then I will come. What's the connection between the Baal Shem Tov's teachings being spread out and Mashiach's coming? What does one have to do with the other? I remember now I saw you an answer. What's the connection between the animals not doing any harm and Mullah is there, so we'll get there in a second. Since the whole concept of the coming of Mashiach is that Hashem will be revealed, so what's the best preparation for that? To bring Hashem's awareness to the masses, starting from ourselves, from our own minds. So the best preparation for Mashiach is involving our minds with this school of thought, which ultimately gives us a healthy perspective on life. So when Mashiach comes, we don't feel let down. Hey, what happened to the steak? It's not what we're looking for. It's not what we're waiting for. We're waiting for a time where that Hashem will circumcise our heart. We know circumcision is not done on the heart. What does it mean? Hashem will circumcise our heart. What it means is that Hashem will remove the concealment that doesn't allow our heart to be sensitive and to feel godliness. In nowadays, what are we sensitive to? We're sensitive to physical and materialistic things. That's what we're sensitive to. When Mashiach comes, that's going to change. And as I said, a likus v'pshitus. Why? Because Hashem is going to remove that concealment. Because we're going to be sensitive to godliness and spirituality. Yeah.
If Hashem asks Mashiach, when are you coming? And the Mashiach responds back to the, or who says back to,
Mashiach answered the Baal Shem Tov.
Says back to Baal Shem Tov, I'm coming when your wellspring spread out, meaning the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. It makes it sound like, therefore, that in a certain way the Baal Shem Tov is Mashiach, because if the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov are what's required, so to speak, or prepare the way or set the stage for coming Mashiach, then there's a connection, at least a clear connection between the Baal Shem Tov and Mashiach.
It's a prerequisite, really. It's
Yeah.
a prerequisite of the coming of Mashiach. It's not his Mashiach himself.
Okay, so it's a prerequisite, so then there's a major connection, I'm saying.
100%?
Yeah, but that's what he
100%?
Yeah,
He
okay.
said that 100%.
Yeah.
So back to that question of why the animals and how the animals will be affected by the godly revelation. So we know, actually, there's an interesting discussion. What happens when Mashiach comes? What happens first? What happens second? And what happens third? So we know that most codes of Jewish law don't talk much about Mashiach, or don't talk at all about Mashiach, because they're all written in the time of exile, for the time of exile. So the concept of Mashiach is discussed a lot in Torah and many Sfarim, but in Sifrei Halacha, in Sfarim that talk about Halacha, code of Jewish law, Mashiach is hardly mentioned. And the exception to that is the Rambam. The Rambam in his Sefer Halacha goes through every single subject in Halacha, whether it's Bizman Hazeh, in our days, or in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. And he talks about the halachas of Mashiach. And he says that when Mashiach comes, first you have the Beis HaMikdash, and then the Yidden are gathered back to Eretz Yisrael, and Tchias HaMeisim is at the end. Why is it that it has to be in this order? Why can't it be in a different order? Why can't there first be Kibbutz Goliath and then Beis HaMikdash? Who cares which order? Why does the Rambam pick this? And as I said, although in Midrashim you can find many other opinions, but in Halacha this is the only opinion that we find. Why is that? Why is Rambam Paskin the first Beis Hamikdash is built, and then Kibbutz Goliath happens that the Yidden are redeemed? So it is explained, based on what we said earlier, that the Beis Hamikdash is a place where Hashem was revealed, particularly through the 10 Nisim that constantly took place. But even more, it is written that the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, had a very interesting paradox. Makaim ha'arein, eino min hamida. The place, Makaim ha'arein, the place of the ark, eino min hamida, was not part of the measurement of the room. Which means to say, in the Mikdash it was a different measurement, 20 by 20 I think. But in the Mishkan, let's say it was 10 by 10. So if you measured, so let's say this Sefer is the Aron. So if you measured from here to the wall, you would have 5 amas. If you measure from here to the wall, you would also have 5 amas. Over here, which was smaller, the Aron was smaller and was long and the width was less. If you measured from here to the wall, again was 5 amas. And if you measured from here to the wall, again was 5 amas. So you had a total of 10 amas without the Aron. Now what happens if you walked away from the Aron, you stood by the wall, and you measured from the wall to wall, or from wall to wall? You'd also have only 10 amas. So the place that the Aron took up, which it did take up space, it had to be a certain measurement and took up space. But that space didn't take up space, which obviously makes no sense. There's no way we can understand that in the way we count. Which reminds me of a good joke that I can't not say. I repeat it all the time, but you're not my regular crowd. I heard this from my father, that a boss was looking to hire an accountant. So people came for the interview. Many people. He was a big boss in a big company. So he advertised, on this day, the accountants can show up. And when the first guy walks into the office, he made sure to leave the door open, the boss. And he asks the accountants, tell me, how much is 1 plus 1? So the accountant says, 2. He says, okay, have a good day, you can go home. Second guy walks into the interview. He says, how much is 1 plus 1? So he figured if he says 2, it's not going to work. It didn't work for the first guy. So he says 3. He says, you idiot, get out of here. So the third guy walks into the interview, and the boss asks the same question. So how much is 1 plus 1? So he looks at him in the face. Boss, how much do you want it to be? Hired. You know, the Rabbi Shmuel Lein is the one who controls this world. How much 1 plus 1 is? As much as he wants it to be. So in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's the way it was. It's true that if the Aron is 2.5 this way, 1.5 that way, then it can't take a place and not take a place. But that's how it was. If you measured from wall to wall, you had 10. If the Mikdash, I think it was 20, and the same thing the other way. And if you measured the Aron itself, it had a measurement. So Makim ha'Aron eina min hamida. The place of the Aron had no place.
One drop is one drop is one drop.
So this implies that which place in the world had the most intense godly revelation? The Kodesh HaKadoshim. And from there, the entire Beis HaMikdash had the 10 miracles. But if you want to look at the whole world and say, where is there the greatest godly revelation? In the Beis HaMikdash. This is the explanation to us why the Beis HaMikdash is first built and then Kibbutz Goliath happens. Because we need the revelation of Hashem to be in this world, to be able to draw back the Yidden to Eretz Yisrael. V'atem tuluktu echad echad ne Yisrael. Mashiach comes, every last Yid is going to be brought back. How? Because Hashem will be revealed in the Beis HaMikdash. And that will give the strength and the power for the Geula to take place. So it has to be in this order. It has to be first Beis HaMikdash. So Hashem's presence is revealed in this world. And as a consequence of that, all the Yidden come to Eretz Yisrael. And then Tchias HaMesim can only happen afterwards. Why? Because what happens when all the Yidden come to Eretz Yisrael? So let's fall back on the same Rambam. When the Rambam talks about what's going to happen when Mashiach's going to come, what does he say? Makrivin karbanos, oisin shmitin v'yoylis, kachom mitzvahs ha'amura b'Torah. That what are we waiting for? When Mashiach comes, that we'll be able to do 613 out of 613 mitzvahs. And nowadays we can't. Many mitzvahs are not applicable. Why are we waiting for Mashiach? We should be able to do every single mitzvah 100% perfectly in its entirety. That can only be done if we have A, the Beis HaMikdash, and B, all, or at least most, of the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. If we're missing those two things, if not all the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, and if there is no Beis HaMikdash, we can't do every mitzvah. And through the mitzvahs that we will do in the Beis HaMikdash, in the whole world, once Mashiach comes and the Beis HaMikdash is built, that will bring even more Hashem's revelation, which will ultimately lead to the perfection of the world until the greatest miracles, until even Tchias HaMesim. So the order, first Mashiach coming, and then building the Beis HaMikdash, and then bringing Yidden back to Eretz Yisrael, and ultimately Tchias HaMesim, is an order that has to be particularly this way. One leads to the other. So just to sum up where we're holding, in one word, we began by talking about the difference between Gola and Geula at the Galus era and the Geula era are 80% the same. The difference is that Aleph, whether the Aleph is revealed or the Aleph is concealed. What makes the entire difference is whether Hashem is revealed or Hashem is concealed. And that revelation that will be when Mashiach comes depends upon us. In the words of the Alter Rebbe and Tanya, Ma'aseinu v'avodaseinu kol zman meshech hagolus, our work and our toil throughout the entire exile is what brings about the revelation of Yemais HaMashiach and of Tchias HaMesim, of the days of Mashiach and of the resurrection of the dead. And being that the makeup of Geula is mostly of Gola, this implies that we don't leave Galus behind and run away from Galus and go to Geula. Rather, we take the Galus with us to Geula, because the Geula itself is elevated to Geula. Because the moment you reveal the Aleph in the Geula, then there's nothing wrong with Geula anymore. The only reason Geula is a problem is because you don't see Hashem. The moment you see Hashem, it's not Galus anymore. So it's about the perspective, it's about the awareness. But I just want to take that Aleph to two more levels. In addition to the meaning that the Aleph is Aleph Shalom, the Aleph could also be two more things. The Aleph could be Ulfena, Velimud, Aleph Chachma, Aleph Chabina. The Aleph can mean learning, which means that in addition to the awareness of Hashem's existence and bringing that into our life every single second of our day or night, there's also the concept of learning Torah. And Torah has a certain quality even greater than the world itself, meaning the godliness that creates the world. It says that Alpayim Shana Kadma Torah Lo'ilam, that the Torah existed 2,000 years before the world was created. Obviously, it doesn't mean literally, because before the world's created, there's no concept of time. Because even time is created by Hashem, and it's part of the creation of the world. So what does it mean that the Torah exists 2,000 years before the world is created? It doesn't mean in time, it means in Madrega, 2,000 levels higher. So the idea of Limud Torah, of learning Hashem's Torah, and bringing Hashem's knowledge and wisdom into our minds, is something even greater than just having the awareness of Hashem's existence. Obviously, first and foremost, you have to be in touch with that reality. You have to reveal the Aleph, the Aleph Shalom. That everything you do is to serve Hashem. But even above that and beyond that, the idea of learning Torah by itself is even a higher madrega in the Aleph. And then even the third madrega, which I'd rather not discuss at length, but just to mention it at least, Aleph is the same letters as the word Pele, wonder. But that I'm not even going to touch, simply because it's too hard for me to understand, so I obviously have a hard time explaining it. But I just can't hold back the information, because if it's written clearly that when we talk about Gola and Geula, the difference is the Aleph, and the Aleph is explained on these three levels, so just because it's hard for me to explain, it wouldn't be right for me to hide it, not share it with you. So I am mentioning it, although it's Pele, it's beyond me. So on the one hand, we say that when Mashiach comes, we're not in for good lunches, and we're not in for just relaxation. We're here for the awareness of Hashem, for the revelation of the Beis Hamikdash, and so on and so forth with its full glory. On the other hand, when you look at Chumash, what does it say? If you're going to follow the Torah and the mitzvahs, what's going to happen? Hashem is going to give you the rain and all of the physicality and materialism that you need. So how could it be? We just spoke for 45 minutes about the fact that Mashiach is not here just to heal us. Mashiach is not here just to give us an abundance of, well, physically. But if you open the Chumash, it doesn't say that. If you open the Chumash, it says that if you listen to Hashem, you'll have what you need physically. So you can tell me that Torah talks to the majority of people. And the majority of people, if you're going to start telling them spiritual things, you'll turn them off right away. So it has to say in Chumash, you listen to me, I'll give you what you need physically. The problem with that is that you're excluding the good people. So Hashem's only talking to the regular guy? What about the good guys? Hashem doesn't talk to them? The Chumash doesn't talk to them? That can't be either. So the Rebbe talks about this. And he says, we say, Kihem chayenu va'irech yameinu. We say it in davening, in Ma'ariv, we're about to daven Ma'ariv soon. That learning Torah and the ways of Torah is our life. The question is, what does that mean? The Torah is a very important thing in our life. It's a certain amount of time of our day, of our knowledge, of our interest, but that's our life? It's a small part of our life. It's a big part of our life. For some of us it's bigger, some of us it's smaller, in quality or in quantity. But how can we say, this is our life? How do we make such a blanket statement? So we know that by a Yid, physicality and spirituality are not supposed to be separate from one another. They're supposed to be connected. There's supposed to be harmony over there. We learn about that in Tanya too. Even the Gashmias of a Yid, even the physical experiences of a Yid are supposed to be connected with the Torah. Not only directed by the Torah's direction, but really in sync and really part of that one and same experience. By a wedding, people dance simply with their feet. They're jumping and dancing. They're excited. They're happy. A wedding is supposed to be a very joyous occasion. It's a big deal to bring two people together, and it's going to bring further generations. A wedding is a real reason for simcha. So how do we react? We dance. Why do we dance? Why don't we just sit and smile? Why don't we say jokes? We dance. Why do we spend our time dancing? Or why don't we learn? Yeah, it says that Torah makes the person happy. That's why, God forbid, if Tisha B'Av is before Mashiach comes, hopefully it won't happen. So our learning is restricted. We can't learn whatever we want on Tisha B'Av, because if you're going to learn any section in Torah you want, you're going to be happy. And if you have to celebrate Tisha B'Av in the time of Golas, then you can't learn everything you want in Torah because it's going to bring you joy. No? So if that's the case, by a wedding, we should all open a big Gemara and we should learn. Wouldn't that be the greatest simcha? And the answer is that because the simcha is so intense, because it's such a great simcha, a wedding is really a real reason to be happy. So that joy can't stop on an intellectual level. It goes all the way through to the bottom, to the way we act, to what we do, and with which part of our body? With our legs, with the lowest part of our body. Yeah, most people don't dance on their hand, most people dance with their feet. The lowest part of our body is elevated, is raised, because the joy of the wedding has such a strong effect on us that it even raises our feet. Right now, no one's going to dance. Why? Because there's nothing strong enough to pick us up from our chairs and make us dance. But at a wedding, there's something in the environment that's so strong that gets us off our chairs and even gets our feet to dance. So when the simcha is limited, you say a good joke and you smile and it's enough. But by a wedding with such an intense simcha, so you dance with your legs. How can we know that the Torah affected us entirely, not just superficially, when it affects even our physical well-being? And all of our physical needs come directly from the Torah. The Torah is our life means that we're so connected to the Torah that every single thing in our life, may it be physical, may it be a materialistic need, comes directly from the Torah. How do we know that we accepted, that we received Hashem's Torah entirely, if it affects us all the way until our physical needs? If Hashem will only give us a spiritual reward for learning Torah, for doing mitzvahs, that would imply that the Torah and the mitzvahs only affected us superficially. It didn't overwhelm and flood our physical being. There's a certain part of us that remains separate. And therefore, had the Torah rewarded us with only spiritual things, it wouldn't be enough. The Torah has to tell us, even to the tzaddik who serves Hashem, because he loves him. If you're going to learn Torah in a way of chakika, that it's engraved, separate discussion, but you're going to take it in all the way, and you'll connect with it, the consequence will be that our physical needs and well-being will connect to the Torah. And that's what it means. And this is the idea of when Mashiach comes, although on the one hand, it's all about Deas Hashem, it's all about knowing Hashem. On the other hand, it will have a physical effect on our health and on our wealth. Really, really physically. And like the Rambam says, that the goodies, the delicacies will be found as dirt and dust. And that child in Cheder that comes home and says, Mommy, you know, my teacher said today that when Mashiach comes, there'll be candies growing on the trees. Yes, that's true too. The Mashiach is such a reality to the extent that even our physical needs will be met as well, and as consequence of the spiritual revelation of that time. And nowadays, it's important that we prepare ourselves for Mashiach on all of these levels discussed above, but also very important the realization that it's really, 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 really happening. A grandson of a very chashuv Rebbe told me recently that he read an article written by a Chabadnik about Mashiach, and he learned a whole new thing. So I said, what did you learn a new thing? He says, you say Ani Ma'amin every day. He says, yes, I do. So he tells me, no, you don't understand. Everyone believes Mashiach is coming. Everyone waits for Mashiach. But from this article I understood that the Lubavitcher Rebbe's explanation to waiting for Mashiach is that just like you wait by the bus stop for your bus, in that same way, you wait for Mashiach's coming. Just like it's a reality that if the bus is supposed to arrive at 10 o'clock, it's going to arrive at 10 o'clock. And if it's 10:01 already, then you know that the bus is really, really coming. The same is true when it comes to waiting for Mashiach. That we have to wait for Mashiach in a way that it's really, really, really happening. Hashem should help that this Tisha B'Av should be celebrated in Yerushalayim with the Beis HaMikdash, with Kibbutz Nidchei Yisrael, and with Tchias HaMesim.